Hi, this is Kid O'Toole. I'm with Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. This episode, we are exploring the deluxe box set of the Revolver album, and our special guest is Jason Kruppa. You may remember him from previous episodes. He is the author of All Things Must Pass Away, along with our good friend Ken Womack, and he is the creator and host of the podcast Producing the Beatles. During the original broadcast of this episode, he brought some incredible isolations, sound isolations from various tracks on the album. Many of them he had created himself. Unfortunately, due to a copyright notice, we have had to remove those from the episode. So this version that you are watching or listening to, we had to remove those. So you are going to hear in the episode some references to those examples of some of the isolations he did. So that's why you are not going to hear them in this episode. And it's a real shame because they were really terrific. He really did some great, showed some examples of what demixing is, as well as remixing. So we want to thank Jason for bringing those examples and making them for us and for playing them. So, but we have plenty of other things to say in this episode, so you will definitely enjoy it anyway. So we hope you will find this episode enlightening and bring you a whole new perspective on this wonderful box set. So enjoy.
We're going to talk, as I said, about Revolver. We've got a very special guest tonight, and now the four of us hosts are here. Right. It's just going to be awesome because we were all having technical problems. So let me just quickly introduce the group, our special guest, and we will start the show over. Thank goodness we didn't really get that far anyway. So my name is Kid O'Toole. I am the author of Songs We're Singing, Guided Tours to the Beatles' Lesser Known Tracks, Michael Jackson FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the King of Pop, and co-edited with Ken Womack, Fandom and the Beatles, the act you've known for all these years. Introducing my friends, he is the co-host of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney-centric podcast, along with our good friend Andy Nichols. He is Tom Hunyadi. Hello again, Tom.
Kid, it is always good to meet you, no matter how many takes it takes. But looks like we're good now, and I got my three buddies here along with another good buddy, and we're going to have a great show tonight.
Absolutely. And he is the host of the very popular YouTube channel, Mean Mr. Mayo. Of course, we all know he is anything but mean. And we are very happy to welcome him back to the show, not only because he is back because of the technical problems, he solved that, but he is back and healthy and better than ever. Joe Mayo. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Kid. Hello, Tom. Hello, Ken. And hello, Jason, our guest. And
yes,
one last question I have for you. Do I have to enable mask?
No.
Mask. Okay.
No,
sorry. It's never happened before.
That's weird. No, you don't.
Okay. Are you very sure?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's weird. I've never heard that. So, yep, it's all bets are off tonight, folks. It's just going to be great. And then, as I've said before, the man that needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it to him anyway. He is the co-host, or not the co-host. He is the only host. There's only one Ken of of the longtime syndicated show, Every Little Thing, where he plays just that. Every little thing from the solo years, the group years, everything. He is also the co-host of the very popular podcast, Things We Said Today with Darren DeVivo and Alan Kozin. And as I've said, how popular is it? Just ask Peter Jackson. And if that all weren't enough, he is also the host of the YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio, where he welcomes everybody from musicians to authors to podcasters to videocasters, you name it. We're sometimes on there too. Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken. Again.
Hi, Kit. Joe, Tom, Jason, everybody watching. I'm thrilled to be on tonight to talk about a truly great album.
You bet. Yep. Yeah, we've all been looking forward to this. And then finally, our mystery, well, I guess not so much of a mystery guest, but he's been with with us before. We are so happy to welcome him again. He is the co-author of, with again, our friend Ken Womack, of All Things Must Pass Away, which is a wonderful book about the year that best friends and collaborators, I think you may have heard of them, George Harrison and Eric Clapton, created their just seminal albums, All Things Must Pass and Layla. If you haven't read it, and they came on our show to talk about it, as you may recall, if you haven't read it, please do so. And also, he is the creator and host of the podcast Producing the Beatles, which is all about how the Beatles created their songs and recorded them. And if you are not a technical person, I'm certainly not, it's still, Jason really explains and demonstrates in a way that anybody can understand them and really brings new insight into their songs. So do subscribe. So welcome back to Talk More Talk, Jason Kruppa. Hello, Jason.
Thank you. That was a tour de force. No, people watching this don't know that Kit just did that a few minutes ago. And she's just gone through it again breathlessly. So take a breath. You've got a
easy, Kit.
Take a sip of that Coke.
Yeah. She might burst into flame here any minute.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. So so welcome everybody tonight. We are really excited to get into Revolver, but first we are going to go through the news. So Ken, start again. What what news do you have?
Well, first of all, we have to mourn the passing of rock and roll pioneer Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry was one of several rock artists of the 50s that the Beatles greatly admired, known for such classic songs as Whole Lotta Shakin' Going On and Great Balls of Fire. With gratitude to Mark Lewison, take out his book again, The Beatles Live. He lets us know in that book all the different shows that the Beatles did, dating all the way back to their Quarrymen days and all the songs they performed live. You want to know the Jerry Lee Lewis songs the Beatles used to do? There was High School Confidential, Mean Woman Blues, also done by Elvis Presley, When the Saints Go Marching In, also done by Fats Domino, Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, the song You Win Again, which was actually written by Hank Williams, who recorded it, and Jerry did the same, and also the song Fools Like Me. During the Get Back, Let It Be sessions, the Beatles rehearsed Great Balls of Fire, High School Confidential, and a whole lot of shaking going on. And during the Plastic Ono Old Band sessions, John jammed on Jerry's song It'll Be Me, which you can find in the Plastic Ono Old Band archival box set, and Jerry's album from 2006 called Last Man Standing had Jerry sing a duet with Ringo Starr. And together they did Chuck Berry's classic Sweet Little 16. Jerry Lee Lewis was 87. There'll be a special event taking place in New York City at the 92nd Street Y Kaufman Concert Hall on November the 20th. Olivia Harrison will be joined by Academy Award-winning director Martin Scorsese to discuss Olivia's new book of poems called Came the Lightning, 20 Poems for George. You can hear them delve into the intimate stories of grief and sustained emotional connection told through Olivia's deeply moving poems, also Scorsese's longtime fascination with George's music, and much more. Tickets are available at the website 92ny.org/events. And you can purchase tickets to be there in person or to witness it online. There's another new Beatles video that's been made to promote the new Revolver box set, following the first one for Taxman. The new one is for I'm Only Sleeping, which kind of like Taxman is also animated, but this one is very well done. Very clever and lots of special effects involved. And I'm
More
really
artistic.
Yeah.
definitely. This is one that I can watch many times over. Taxman, I don't know if I would say that about. It's very much a lyric video, the Taxman one. And very reminiscent of Yellow Submarine-ish. It's kind of like it would fit that style. But definitely it's online. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm Only Sleeping, the new video. Denny Lane has just announced that he'll be doing an acoustic songs and stories tour beginning next February. His songs will span his entire career from the Moody Blues to the Electric String Band, plus Ginger Baker's Air Force, of course, Wings, and his solo music, plus his early influences and some unreleased new music. All the dates so far have him playing at various city winery locations, beginning on February 7th in New York City, February 8th, Montgomery, New York, February 9th in Boston, February 11th, Philadelphia, February 15th in Washington, D.C., and February 19th for you, Kit, Chicago.
So it's gonna be a loose show, you know, with the wine at these wineries, you know.
Yeah. It's a nice
Is that
venue.
strategic, I wonder?
Right.
It's always a joy to see Denny in concert. I've seen him many times.
You're lucky because he doesn't come to the West Coast on his own.
Yeah, I'm very.
He has to be kidnapped, abducted to the West Coast. He doesn't come on his own accord.
No.
I'm going to shut up now. You just guys keep talking.
No, this is part of it.
This is part of it.
We've now entered the zone of things we haven't done before.
Yep, this is anything goes tonight. Anything
really,
goes.
It's really dangerous ground.
No, you'll fit right in, Jason. But really, Denny's is really an enjoyable show. I've seen him a few times do the entire Band on the Run album with the backup band, and he does the first Moody Blues album that he was on too. So, and then he'll sneak in some Wing songs in there that you might be surprised to hear. Like I heard him do The Note You Never Wrote in concert, something like that, Deliver Your Children. So I'll be looking forward to that. I'm sure I'm going to be seeing the New York show, maybe Boston. The Traveling Wilburys recording of their song End of the Line is in the trailer for the new Tom Hanks movie, A Man Called Otto. There's supposed to be a soundtrack album coming out in January. I don't have a track listing yet. Would be nice if the Wilbury song was on it. Thanks to Scott O'Rourke, Beatle DJ, for that information. And an article that appeared in Consequence of Sound, producer Rick Rubin picked 8 songs that made his Desert Island discs, of which he chose one Beatles song, which happened to be Across the Universe, which he said not only taught him the basics of songwriting, but inspired him to learn how to meditate. He says, from 3 years old to 7 years old, the Beatles was everywhere and everywhere in my home. And it somehow imprinted what a great song is in a very deep level before I knew that I was looking for what that was. Also want to let you know, I have it now in my possession. Oh, that's the back cover. Ringo at the Greek Theater 2019. It is coming out November the 25th. 2 CDs and 24 tracks altogether. His current band, all only with Greg Raleigh at the time, not with Edgar Winter. And I haven't listened to it yet, but I will be in the next few days and talking about that, probably on my channel and here as well. And a few more things. Our colleague Ken Womack has just scored a brand new interview with Klaus
I was
Lehman.
gonna say, not another book.
Oh no, there's like 2 more. Don't worry.
Yeah.
He's writing them now.
Yep.
Yeah, of course he is.
Of course he is.
But if you want to hear Ken's new interview with Klaus, it's on his podcast called Everything Fab 4. One of our listeners, Bob Tavares, let me know that the November issue of Mojo magazine is dedicated to the recording sessions for Revolver, and it comes with a small poster and CD. And our regular listener, viewer, Sue Gagney, wrote to me today to let me know that Ringo plays drums on a CD by Alan Darby called Rolling Man, which was actually released earlier this year. Ringo plays on the song Deep in the Heart of Me, And Ringo was also heard in the introduction thanking Alan for letting him participate. The CD appears to be a charity release, proceeds going to Turn Up for Recovery / Crossroads. You can purchase it at this website, turnupforrecovery.org/Alan Darby, ALANDARBY. Thank you, Sue, for that information. I didn't see that in Chris Englehart's book.
Wow.
Ooh. See,
Ooh,
this
so-
is why he's got to continue the book series. You
Yep.
can't just, yeah.
You know,
Yep.
Susan's watching right now, so thank you, Susan. Good scoop.
and like I said, I got the title for his next book, Keep Undercover.
On the cover. There you go.
Very nice. Nice.
First entry for that to add. There you go.
Yep.
That's all the news I got this time.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Great stuff. All right, folks, it's time to dig in. We've all been waiting for this a long time, as I mentioned, and now's the time. And as I mentioned earlier too, we've got a really special guest who will has a lot to share, and even a show and tell, so to speak, to really demonstrate the mixing techniques that were used on this this whole set, actually.
Or demixing is the
or
case may be.
demixing, as the case may be. You're right. So let's get into it. We're first going to talk about remixing. There's been quite a bit of talk about it. I'm sure you all know that. What was, the pros and cons of it, the purpose of it. So in general, let's start with, what did you think of the remixed album? What were your general impressions of it? And I'm talking the stereo remix. So Tom, let's start with you. What were your general thoughts when you first heard it?
Well, as I said on a past episode of Ken Michaels Radio, when we were doing what we thought was, the best or the greatest Beatles record of all time, and this was my, when I'm listening to Abbey Road, it's Abbey Road. When I'm listening to White Album, it's the White Album. But when I'm listening to Revolver, it's the Revolver. And I think I can just put at the end and I'm just going to say Revolver is my favorite, and I think it is the best Beatles album of all time. Now, did it need a remix? I mean, I don't know. Did any of these albums need a remix that came? I mean, maybe the first, 2, 3. But I mean, I thought this album sounded great before, but I love this album. There's a couple things that I had an issue with that we can talk when we go track by track, or our highlights or our dislikes. But all in all, I thought that this was a completely different listening experience to my ears. And when I get these remixes, I tend to listen to them with headphones and headphones only, just because I kind of I can just hear what's going on differently than say the 2009 mixes, but or remaster, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. But to me, it was fine. It was a good listening experience. Again, a few little problems, but all in all, it's good. Yeah. Don't mind it.
Okay. All right. Joe, what about you? What were your general thoughts when you first heard it?
Well, it's twofold, because at first I listened without headphones. I never listened to my music with headphones. And the Giles Martin remixes are always a mixed bag for me. Some tracks really impress me when I listen to these. Same thing with Revolver, and I'm like, wow, that's nice. Other times I just find that I'm missing things that I used to hear that are quieted down, and I'm so used to decades of listening, like, where are the crash cymbals on this song,
right.
And where's this and where's that? So I kind of like it. It's a mixed bag, but I was urged by a lot of people to listen to headphones. So I listened to it again on the headphones, and a lot of the things that I hadn't been able to pick up, I heard on the headphones, and I really enjoyed the experience with the headphones. I really appreciated the new stereo mix that way. Although, yeah, it's great, but I don't listen to with headphones ordinarily. So I guess if I really want to get the most out of it from me, I will play it through the headphones, the stereo mix. What I personally like best is that we can get into whether or not you should remix these things or not. For me, it's the early albums I want. I want from 63 to 65. I want to hear what they can do. But I'm mostly concerned personally with the vocals being more centered. I don't like so much things all over the place. The hard panning. So that was a triumph for me, just to get the vocals where I want them. Kind of the mono was used as the template, right, for this.
Yes.
So,
and I
so
agree.
overall, I liked it overall when I put the headphones on.
Yeah, listening to it through headphones is a completely different experience. I completely agree. Ken, what about you? What were your general thoughts?
Well, I loved it from start to finish, the remix. There's some things that I hate to say I might prefer over the original mix. It's tough for me to say that because I never had a problem with the original mixes. And I'm kind of surprised, ever since these box sets have come out, all these Beatle fans are saying what they don't like about the original mixes songs. And for me, it's kind of like, do you touch the Mona Lisa? There's very little that I would change about a lot of Beatle mixes, but I like the fact that you can hear just about everything that they recorded instrumentally here, but at the same time, I have a tough time grasping this idea. I would never want a new fan to be brought up on the remixes. I want them to be brought up on the original mixes because that's how the Beatles approved them. That's how they went out originally. Even though they didn't care for a long time about the stereo mixes, at least all four of them were there when it went out. And even though there are things that you hear now that you didn't hear before, was it meant to be that way? I question that sometimes. It's a revelation to hear things that you hadn't heard before. In particular, there's certain, guitar playing that George did that wasn't really lead guitar parts. It was what he would do to accompany. It's like a rhythm guitar part, but sort of that and lead guitar playing at the same time. Phrases that maybe you didn't hear as well before, and it's nice to hear that. But again, are we meant to hear that? Is it always a good thing for everything to be brought up in the and everything clear? It's a tough thing for me to deal with because you don't have John and George here to approve these things, but you have to rely on Yoko and Sean and Olivia and Danny and their judgment to represent their fathers and husbands. But there's a few songs on here that to me are improved, but still, I'm always going to love the originals. But I will maintain what I've said from the very beginning. I'm kind of happy about the fact that I haven't changed this. This is one thing that has stuck with me. As long as the original mixes are out there, they can do whatever they want to with remixes. They can remaster this catalog 10 times and I'll be happy. Remastering, I never have a problem with. Remixes are another animal altogether. And I'm always going to question, whether or not John and George would have approved this. They could be very fussy about these things. You never know. But that's one thing that bothers me about this whole process. But you can't do anything about that, unfortunately. But overall, sonically, it's fantastic. It's incredible to listen to in the headphones. But I just like Joe. The one problem I've ever had is I don't like lead vocals in one channel. I've never liked it. It was fine back in the 60s if you bought a stereo where the speakers were a few feet apart. When you've got a good stereo system and you've got a lot of separation, it's more like karaoke Beatles when you listen to it. Seriously, with a lead vocal in one channel. I don't like that at all.
I agree.
When that's corrected, I'm happy about that.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting, Ken, too, about the other camps, whether the John and George camp and whether or not they're getting, or Giles is getting any kind of instruction from them to maybe bring something up or take something away. We were talking about that before we went live, where, is Giles, it seems like he's not free to do whatever he wants. He is working for them still. But is he getting instructions from the four camps in to to present us, rather than just going in there and doing what he thinks might be right.
Yeah, it is a good point.
Paul
Yeah.
and Ringo, I think, are getting maybe some say in there. I like that the
yeah.
drums on all of these, the drums are enhanced. That's
Me
one
too.
thing, especially going back to the earliest albums. I always feel Ringo's drums are too quiet, too muted. I'm hoping that they can do something with those and really boost that up to hear the skins more.
Absolutely.
Mm.
All right, Jason, I'm dying to hear. What were your first impressions? And tell us what you thought.
Well, so I meant to send you this, and I just didn't have time to find the clip, but there's an interview with George Martin in the early 80s where he told a story. Sometime in the 50s, he was recording a Scottish choir, and he had recorded them in stereo, and he'd had the engineer, he'd worked with the engineer to get it so that you could hear every individual voice across the stereo spectrum. And he was so proud of this. And the choir director comes in and he hears the playback, and he says, "Mr. Martin, I've spent my entire life trying to get them to sound as one voice, and you've just ruined it all. You've undone all of that." And the reason I tell that story is because whether you're in stereo or whether you're in mono, I think this is, personal philosophy, but you want to mix to hit you all at once. You don't want to have a bunch of little things going on, because you sort of lose the impact. That was John Lennon's point about evolution in stereo, is it took all the power out of it. The mono mix for him was the one that just sort of punches you in the face and is like, you sit up and you pay attention to that. But even in stereo, I think you can achieve that. So with that in mind, I will say overall, I think it is a more balanced album, about a balanced mix. And I've always thought the original had problems because of, they're limited to 4-track. So they're panning vocals to one side, or they have to separate things in kind of a natural way, which is not how we hear things. Like you say, we expect to see to have the vocal in the middle. That just makes sense. And to have the drums in the middle. Those seem to be reasonable ways for mixing things. But the other side of that is that we do on occasion lose some of that power, some of that punch. But everybody can go through and nitpick every mix, and we'll probably do a little bit of that later. But I think, overall, I'm glad it was remixed. I'm glad that the ADT has been kind of toned down, because that made, especially I'm Only Sleeping, they still kept some of that, but it made the original mix, I use the word smeary. It just seems like it's unfocused, and maybe, that's good for the song. But it always bugged me, especially on headphones, because you put them on and you just have like this smear of sound across the sound stage. And if you're not listening on headphones, maybe it's not such a big deal. Maybe you listen in your car, sort of have it playing in the background. Little things like that, or, panning the toms on Got to Get You Into My Life hard over to one side where the snare is in the center. It's sort of like, okay, you've alerted me to the fact that you're mixing this. You sort of put yourself in the middle of this experience and kind of taken me out of it. Those are, like I said, those are nitpicks. I think overall, I like to hear the detail, and I'm an advocate for remixing everything you possibly can. As long as, like Ken says, if the originals are out there and you can refer to those, that's great. There's always going to be stuff that I want to change on these remixes. I think anybody who's spent any time with these recordings and sort of taken them into your nervous systems like we have, and people who've lived with this for 50, 60 years. I mean, you're used to the sound of these recordings. It's going to be hard, going to be a hard break from that. But I think overall, I think the casual listener is not really going to pay attention to that. So I sort of look at it as like, okay, this is my response to it, but I also have to think about how other people are going to look at this, and other situations people are going to be listening to this record in. So, and I said this before we started, Giles has got to walk a ridiculous line for these things. And who knows what he's facing behind the scenes. And, he's not going to please everybody. That's just a fact. We can say, oh, well, the bass isn't punchy enough. And I agree with some of that too. or we can say, you know, I don't like the way this is panned, or this is kind of like, what, that's a ridiculous choice. But, you know, everybody's going to have a different opinion about every song. Some people may say, oh, I really love that that guitar is panned from one side to the other on I Want to Tell You. Now, it's like, that's a cool effect to some people. So, you know, he's not going to make everybody happy. And I understand that. I have some opinions certainly about the outtakes, but again, you know, not my call. And I realize that he's got to walk a line there too. So that's my, you know, just sort of first response after having listened to this 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
Only 5 or 6
times. Well, of course.
Right.
Now, before we get into which mixes we liked, which we didn't, Jason, I thought you could give us some insider info as to how these were done. You know, I guess that's part of the story of this is how these remixes were accomplished and on. I know you have some particular insight into that. So
right, and we have some examples that we can play too. But
yes,
you know, we were talking earlier. Ken was talking about, we're just, I guess in general, just talking about 4-track and why certain things were done the way they were done. You know, 4-track at the time for them seemed like a tremendous luxury after they're working on 2-track. But they, you know, each of these tracks is piled up with 2 or usually 3 or 4 parts. So you have very dense layered arrangements, even on a 4-track, and it gets even deeper on Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour. You still got 4-track, and so you have, you know, 4, maybe 3 or 4 elements on each track. So that's maybe 10, 12 sounds that you have to deal with on 4 tracks. Where do you put these? You know, how do you plan this? So there's a lot of planning that went in to how to record these, how to arrange these on the tape, and then how to mix it so all those elements came out. And that's one of the things about the drums, is that you'll hear overdubs of like a snare part on one track, and it's just to bring out the drums because they've been drowned out by other overdubs. And in mixing, they want to make sure they still have that beat. So they were compromising a lot just to get these mixes to sound decent. So I think being able to now go back to this, and because of the new technology that's developed over the last few years, to be able to go back to this and say, okay, we can now break these tracks down. We can take these 3 or 4 elements and we can break them apart, and you know, then we can hear things more clearly. I think that's very exciting. I think, you know, to do that to an extreme degree is probably going to be distracting, and we don't really need it to be everything to be that discrete. But I think, you know, it opens up possibilities for especially Rubber Soul. That's, you know, that is a weird mix from the get-go. I mean, it's instruments on one side, vocals on the right, on the other side for the most part, and it's just a weird listening experience. So yeah, I mean, that's just the rough overview of why these recordings sounded the way they did in the first place. And then to get to where we are, where we're remixing. Do you want to talk now about the sort of the technology that we're discussing here?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't we get into that, and then we can get into our pros and, you know, what we liked, what we didn't like. Because I think,
Right.
yeah, talking about the technology of it, I think really gives an insight, you know,
Right.
further insight to just how complicated this was.
Right, right. So a lot of people listening probably know the technology they're using is what Peter Jackson used on the Get Back project, which was developed by, let me make sure I get his name right, because this is the guy I think that his name we need to be mentioning a lot, is Emile Delarey. Let me make sure. Delarey, Emile Delarey. He's the one who really developed the software. He's a mixing engineer, and he was the one that developed. We call it AI. It's basically a lot of computing power to sort of mimic how the human brain analyzes things. And like we can listen to something and pick the drums out, or pick the bass out, or pick the guitar out. These are computers that are being trained to be able to do that, algorithms that are trained to say, okay, well, that's a drum. Let's pull that out of the mix. That's a voice. And they are training it specifically on Beatles recordings. So their algorithm can distinguish between John's voice and George's voice and Paul's voice. They can, since they've trained specifically on drums, and not just the Beatles drums, but just the way I understand it, they have data sets where they're studying the sounds of drums, and they also have the Beatles drum tracks. Giles apparently played this at several of his presentations about the album. It wasn't just isolating Ringo's drums, it's isolating Ringo's snare, his hi-hat, his cymbals, his toms, his kick drum. It's taking the whole set apart individually clearly enough that you can isolate each of those elements. So if you listen to Got to Get You Into My Life on headphones, you'll hear the snare in the center, you'll hear the tambourine off to the side a little bit, and you'll hear the toms off to like way off to the side. Which is why this is how they've been able to accomplish that. Because Peter Jackson's people have trained their algorithms, trained their programs specifically on Beatles recordings, they have much more power to isolate these things much more cleanly than we just demonstrated there. Like those are okay, but they're not nearly as clean as what we hear on Revolver. And there is a little bit of artifacting on Revolver. Some people have already pointed that out, but I think by and large, it's a huge leap than what we've had before. We're seeing, big jump in technology.
Yeah. And you say the AI technology, was that created prior to Peter Jackson starting to work on Get Back?
Yeah, it's been like Spleeter was created by Deezer. I don't remember what year they started that, but this has been sort of kicking around in development for at least a decade, if not longer.
What's the difference then? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mind.
The algorithms are all sort of basically working the same. They're analyzing frequencies, and they're not just analyzing your frequency, but they're doing it in a way that is intended to mimic how our brains can pick out frequencies. So if we hear John and Paul singing together, if we're familiar with their voices, we can sort of determine, okay, well, that's John singing that, that's Paul singing that. If you listen carefully, they're training their computers, they call it a neural network, artificial intelligence, to think like a human brain, basically.
Yeah.
And what about the Guitar Hero game? I mean, because people got a lot of isolated stuff from that game too, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, is that the same kind of
it's a similar type of thing that was developed at Abbey Road. It was a proprietary software they were using there. It's working on a similar principle. I don't know that it's the same algorithm. I don't know if it's sort of the same foundation, but it's all working in a similar way. The Rock Band stuff they're working from both multi-tracks, and then for older songs where they don't have maybe isolated guitars and drums, that's when they had to use the separation software. And some things work better than others. A lot of the Rubber Soul tracks in isolation sound pretty terrible. And I've tried remixing them and combining them, and it really doesn't work. Whatever they used on those tracks was really pretty destructive.
Interesting.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, that was really fascinating. I mean, just to show what you could do, even just with that kind of software, and imagine what they used with Peter Jackson's software that, where you have to teach it, obviously, to recognize different voices. And I mean, what you said about even recognizing, for example, Ringo's drum kit, the different cymbals, the different toms, I mean, just the individual pieces, that is incredible. I mean, I hadn't even thought about it being that specific, but of course, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So,
it's like I said, it's a huge leap. And I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see things even more dramatic because, technology develops exponentially. It's not linear. So we build on what came before, and it expands at such a faster rate.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a bit about, now that we've learned a bit about how this works and how the remixing process works, let's talk a little bit about some of the specific remixes. What were some of the ones, a few specific songs that you thought particularly benefited from the remixing. So Joe, what were a couple of songs that really stood out for you? That
Well,
were
I was listening for Eleanor Rigby just because I wanted Paul's voice mainly to be more centered. I didn't want to have that awkward situation where it kind of like goes off. I forget exactly how to describe it. When he starts singing Eleanor, the first Eleanor, it kind of goes over. I kind of didn't want that. So I was really happy with that. I thought besides his voice being so prominent, you had the sharp and clear orchestration. I thought that was enhanced really well. That was the one that stuck out for me even before I put the headphones on. I was listening to it just regularly, and I could just pick other ones. Yellow Submarine, I thought was a really nice job. I'm Only Sleeping, Dr. Robert. I mean, certain songs like Dr. Robert. I mean, it's a song where I always, I like almost all Beatles songs pretty much, but I don't think very much Dr. Robert say. But this time it really stood out to me through this, and especially with the take 7, I think it was, which we'll get to maybe another time. I got a
Right.
new appreciation for Dr. Robert through this, and got to get you into my life. Also, really, really powerful in rock. It shows you what a great rock song it is. A pop rock, but you hear this stuff so many times, it becomes burned into your brain.
Yeah.
And you think, yeah, I know Revolver. I mean, it's Revolver. I know it. Yeah. But when you hear this, it's like, wow, that sounds really different. Like different to a point, stronger, more enhanced. And while we know that Revolver was a very innovative album, a change for them, really them exploring and trying different things, it's almost taken for granted. I know that we've come to learn that and accept it. But boy, hearing this, it's almost like I'm rediscovering it, and that also goes for the extras too.
Yeah.
This really is an experimental album. I don't know if I'm wording it the way I want to word it. It's like, yeah, we know that. It's taken for granted that this was an influential and experimental Beatles album for its time. Yeah, but now I'm hearing every little piece of it, step by step, and it just really blows me away, as if
Yeah.
I'm just discovering that it was a new trippy album.
Mhm. Well, and that's great, because I mean that is, hopefully that what this box is encouraging everyone to do is to really rediscover, reappreciate how revolutionary this album was,
And I
so.
do have one disappointment, but I at some point would like to address, but maybe
Oh
I'll
yeah,
leave that.
we'll
for
get to
later.
that in a minute. Yep. So hang on to that. Hang on to that.
Yeah.
Okay, Ken, how about you? Were there a couple of particular remixes that stood out for you?
Well, I think I might repeat what Joe's saying, but Eleanor Rigby definitely. The original stereo mix had Paul, his lead vocal, on the right channel, and the All the Lonely People were in both channels, and the string parts were the same in both channels. But now Paul's lead vocal is in both channels, and the string parts are in separate channels answering each other,
Yep.
which I found to be very interesting. So I like that effect. Also, I love Got to Get You Into My Life, because the very beginning in the stereo mix, the horns are in the right channel, and now they're in both channels. So it's much more powerful that way. Sometimes a lot of it just has to do with lead vocals now being centered, and that's the case with Yellow Submarine. Ringo's lead vocals were in the right channel, and the harmonies were in the right channel. The bass drum was in the left channel. Now Ringo's lead vocals and the harmonies are centered. Still don't understand what the mono Yellow Submarine starts with the guitar underneath when Ringo starts the song in the town, but the stereo didn't have it, and now they put it on this stereo mix. There's a guitar, there's a chord that gets played on the very first note, the first word that Ringo sings, but it's not in the stereo mix, and now they put it in the stereo remix. I don't understand the reasoning behind that, but who knows? But definitely Eleanor Rigby and Got to Get You Into My Life are highlights for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, what about you? What were a couple highlights for you?
Well, the question I have for you I mean, does this seem like a louder listening experience to you guys as well? I mean, I
Yes.
felt like as soon as
That's part of what I think they're trying to do. You know, almost
right,
like modernize it, like that.
Yeah.
right,
Modernize, if you want to
right.
call it that.
Well,
So
it's compressed. It's if you look
okay,
at the waveforms, it is definitely compressed.
right.
The only version I've seen of that that isn't like that are the surround the Atmos channels,
Hmm.
and those have a lot of headroom. So, not to get into graphs and charts and everything, but I can hear the difference.
Yeah,
Some people are probably like, oh, whatever, it's Revolver, it
right,
just, but yeah, so they have definitely made it louder. They're
right.
thinking in mind that it has to be competitive with other modern artists on
Yes,
Spotify who have had
right.
their mixes, pumped up and compressed and no dynamic range, which, personally, I don't think that's a good idea, but
Mhm. But and then
that's
the other
me.
question I have too for you then is like the backing vocals for example, let's say for Here, There, and Everywhere. Now the backing vocals I hear, is it because they turned it up volume wise, or did they turn it up in the mix, or is that the same thing?
So that's the same thing.
Okay,
If they've pushed them up in the mix, then you're going to hear them louder.
okay,
I think
okay.
probably because they are the whole song is mixed differently.
Hmm.
In the original, you've got the vocals on both sides, and you've got the instruments mostly in the middle.
Okay.
And now that everything is spread across the stereo spectrum, I think the original mix sounded kind of thin. And I
Hmm.
think some of what you're probably hearing is that it's a fuller sound, so everything
Right,
sounds a little
right.
more pumped up.
Because when I listen to For No One, I feel like the music is almost kind of level with Paul's vocals now in a way,
Yeah, yeah.
which I enjoy. Like Joe and Ken, Eleanor Rigby. I love you get the violins in one ear, the cellos in the other ear. I thought that was just excellent. The 2 minute mark for I'm Only Sleeping for me was probably price of administration, right? Price of that yawn. I just thought just little
Yeah,
things
we
like
got
that,
it.
little
Yeah.
things like that is just worth it. Or that's what I'm kind of looking for in a way. We all know that they bury some stuff from time to
Mhm,
time, right?
mhm.
And then that just being to hear it very clearly was great. Yeah, the waves in Yellow Submarine were a little more clear,
Yeah.
in my opinion, and yeah, For No One too. Again, Paul's vocals on this really shine, in my opinion. Exact, and same with the bass and drums too. Obviously, part of the drumming on another song that we can get to which is a disappointment, for me.
Mhm.
But yeah, for the most part, yeah, Eleanor Rigby was excellent. And For No One, she said, except for one little thing, but other than that, pretty good.
Not little for me.
Yeah.
If
See,
we're talking about the
yeah.
same thing.
No, it's a big deal, yeah. But still, I kind of appreciate what they did with the other part of the song. It's just taking away one aspect of the
Right,
song that was
right.
really disappointing.
Yeah, I've got to say, when you talked about the yawn, and I talked about this on Joe's Fab Gab show, where when
Yeah,
we talked about, I literally jumped,
yeah,
when I heard that yawn. I mean, I couldn't believe how. I mean, I'd never noticed it that much before. I mean, that was
right.
amazing. And I'll just say, I agree with much of what you said, and Your Bird Can Sing was a highlight for me too. I thought that really just jumped out for the speakers. Just had a great just fullness to it. Made me appreciate the song even more. I just that
Mhm.
was a highlight for me as well. Jason, what about you? Were there a couple of songs that really stood out for you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Eleanor Rigby, I agree.
Mhm.
The vocals are more balanced now. The string octet is I mean, Jeff Emmerich mic'd it extremely close. He had the microphones right up near the strings, near the bridge. So it has that really, really intimate sound where you can hear every little nuance, all the scrapes against of the bows against the strings. And you really hear that here, I think, more than any other mix I've ever heard. The Yellow Submarine song track in 1999 has a mix, but it just doesn't sound that, I mean, it really, you see where, the influence from Psycho comes from, because it
Yes.
really stabs,
Yeah.
So that's great. I think For No One is a much more balanced mix now. You can hear the clavichord clearly. It's not buried with the piano, and it just that to me was very satisfying mix. I also like Andrew Bird Can Sing, and the mix of the horns and the instrumentation on Got to Get You Into My Life is fantastic. It's just, it really has a punch to it now. Because you can now bring everything out, and the fact that those horns were recorded in stereo, even though they had 4 tracks, so they're bouncing things down to accommodate those horns. Now that we can hear that, that's just great. It's just like it surrounds you. It's, it's much more balanced.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, and yes, I totally agree with Eleanor Rigby. Those, the Psycho strings really come through. I mean, I agree, just have you feel that stabbing kind of motion. Yeah, the strings just come through just so much more clearly. I mean, even more than before. I agree. So, all right, since we're running low on time, I'm just going to give you guys, I know you all want to go through it and really pick through the what you didn't like about the remixes. So we're only going to have time. What is one song that really bothered you? Okay, I know you want to mention more. I know you do.
No,
we want to get time. We want to have time to at least touch on the outtakes. So I'm going to have to cut it down. So one song that really bothered you. So Joe, I know you were really raring to go. You were raring to go. So go ahead.
Remember, I'm on Talk More Talk now, not my own channel. Calm about it. No, she said. A major disappointment for me. Where are the cymbal crashes? Ringo, that to me, that makes the song. Ringo goes smash, smash, after every line or whatnot. And very subdued. I didn't hear them much at all. But then later, as I said, I listened with headphones and I said, oh, they're there. Just to me, but subdued, I thought. And also when I put the headphones on, that's when I discerned, which I kind of liked a little. I don't think everybody did. The guitars, again, I'm not a musician, so I'm not really, technically, good at this. But the guitars sounded different, like I'd never heard them before. I saw some of them, but that was not a bad thing. I like John's voice in it. The only thing that got me was that while the rest of Ringo's drums were really good and vibrant, I missed those real echoey cymbal crashes that kind of drove the point home, kind of thing. And when I had the headphones on, I also thought, another song I love, Anya Bird Sing. I thought for some reason, is it just me, that maybe the vocals were not as upfront as all the other songs? I thought it was slightly, ever so slightly buried. I went, I wanted to hear John a little bit more vibrant on that. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Okay, Tom, what
same
got to you?
Same. Yeah, same. She said. It was just so looking forward to hearing just some crashes, on that song from Ringo, and it was just very underwhelmed with that. Now, I'm sure he had his reasonings for doing that, or instructions or whatever, but for my ears, it was very disappointing. And yeah, you hear it, but you hear it, but it's very low. It's not as in your face as I felt it had been in on the 2009. And other than that, I'm more or less pleased with the rest of it. I thought that Paul's bass was a little hidden on I Want to Tell You at first, but then once I heard him on with headphones, I heard it clear and was fine with that. So, but yeah, just she said for me.
Okay, and since you mentioned it, I'll just bring up I Want to Tell You was the disappointment for me. I didn't like the mix on Ringo's drums. I thought they sounded more muddled because I really love the sound on them on the original version. That kind of, I don't know the technical term, Jason, you're going to roll your eyes, but I don't know, that kind of, I don't know, doink doink kind of sound to them. Just had a different, really different tone, and I love that. And they just sound muffled to me on this mix. And also, I couldn't believe they faded it out a little fast, and so you missed that wonderful melisma that Paul does at the end. I mean, it's kind of cut off, and like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
That's one of the
Yeah.
best parts of the song. So that was the disappointment, the biggest disappointment for me. So Jason, what was a disappointment for you?
Well, I'm going to pull out a dark horse here.
No pun intended.
And yes, and say "Love You Too," which I know a lot of people have a difficult time with George's Indian influenced songs, but this one to me was really lacking power. After the introductory part with the sitar, in the original mix, it just comes blasting in. It's just really a strong entry, and here it's subdued. It doesn't do that. And there's some backward guitar parts that in the original mix also have some real punch to them. They are really emphatic. They sort of reach out, and they're making a point in that particular moment in the song. So for me, that was the big disappointment. I like the overall stereo spread, the mix, but I feel like some elements were just pulled back a little too far.
Interesting. Okay. Fair enough. And Ken, how about you? Was there a particular disappointment?
Well, I tell you, I'm going to have to listen more carefully based on what you guys have said. Very critical of she said. Tell you and love you too. But the only thing that really bothered me at all was "Good Day Sunshine," and I like most of what was done with the song. But at the very end, the last chord is not there. It's abruptly, if you listen very carefully. There's the last chord doesn't sustain like it did in the original. It just ends abruptly, and I don't know if there was any reasoning behind that. But overall, I've been pretty pleased with the remix, but maybe I should be more critical. You're teaching me to be more critical.
I mean, I don't think, I think this is all, I'm approaching this very good naturedly. I'm not being hypercritical and like nitpicking this. I think, sure, if I want to do that, I can go down that road, but life's too short. I want to enjoy this music.
Right.
And I think like you said, it's sort of getting us to hear this stuff for the first time, even if it's off and it's like, oh wait, that symbol isn't where it's not as strong as I expected it to be, like Joe was saying. It kind of makes you sit up and pay attention. And so if you think, okay, well, maybe this isn't perfect, it is kind of making us pay attention in a weird way. I'm not saying that's a good thing necessarily or a bad thing. I'm just saying it's a thing. And if it is making us sort of pay attention and think about this, maybe that is a good thing, that it's making us pay attention and sort of sit up to this thing that we've become accustomed to all these years, and we're hearing it with fresh ears. So whether you're critical or whether you hate it and you say, oh, Giles is destroying Beatles legacy, or they're repainting the Mona Lisa or whatever, I think it's, I don't want to go down that too critical road. That's just not, I'm way past that point in my listening experience. I feel like we have the originals. There are a lot of good things in these mixes, and I want to focus on the good stuff in these box sets, because there is a lot of good stuff.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you can overanalyze. That's true.
Yeah.
You can analyze yourself.
Reason for what he did on certain things.
What's
like
that?
When the White Album box set came out, and at the very end of Helter Skelter, I've got blisters on my fingers was in the distance.
Yeah.
Ruined.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just
the piano missing on A Day in the Life, is one of those kind of head scratchers, So I agree. I agree with you. There are definitely things we can nitpick, and I think there are legitimate concerns about some of these mixes, but
yep. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't really have anything, super, super critical to say about these mixes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Before we go on to just briefly go over the outtakes, just a quick question for you, Jason, from one of our viewers, Woodland
Mhm.
Goblin, who we all know, YouTuber, vinyl from the vinyl community, and we all know him. Which he says, can you explain why the cymbals are low on She Said, She Said? Why do you think they are?
I think it was just a mixing decision, and I can't tell you what Joss was thinking, or Sam O'Kell was thinking, but that was their decision to mix it in that way. And I haven't compared it to the mono mix. Maybe they were looking at the mono mix and going, okay, well, this is how the cymbals were on the mono mix. Maybe this is the balance we
Good
need
point.
to go for.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to suggest that. I think maybe there was a lot of similarities. Some of the things that bugged me, quote, were on the mono mix original too.
Yeah. So they have been using that, and on Pepper they used them as references. So that may be the reason.
Yeah, good point.
The reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, we're not going to have time to go over the outtakes as much as we'd like, but of course we can't, end this conversation without at least touching on them. So we have, certainly a nice selection of various takes, some of which we have heard before on Anthology, although at least these are more complete. We really find out, at least I have, how on the Anthology, boy, were those edited. I mean, on this, we definitely get fuller versions. And then some we have not heard before, some and some we've heard on bootlegs and so forth, but definitely in better sound quality here, I would say. So I thought we could go around and just mention some that particularly stood out for us, that really, shed some new light on the album for us, or the songs or the recording process. Some that really just made you sit up and take notice. Just think, wow, this really made me listen to the album in a new way. So Ken, let's start with you this time. What was there? Was there an outtake or two that really just knocked you out?
What's really funny here is that on my other podcast, Things We Said Today, we talked about the outtakes, and we all came up with what was the major highlight for all three of us. And that other take of Got to Get You Into My Life.
Yeah.
Not take one, not the finished version without the vocals, the one where it's just the band without the horns.
Yeah.
It's really great to hear the song that way. And most fascinating was that you actually heard what sounded like the riff from Paperback Writer being used before the verses. And I was starting to think, well, did they bury that in the final mix? And it wasn't in the final mix. But, from what I understand, they saved one of the mono outtakes of that. We have to be so grateful for that. That was fascinating to hear. And it's just great to hear it without the horns and just the band.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone's talking about Yellow Submarine and knowing the whole evolution of that song. Just to know that John played a part in writing it from the very beginning. And not only that, but the time signature was different when John made his demo, because that was in 3/4 time, and the song, as the Beatles developed it, became 4/4 time. But to see how that song progressed, and to hear them do it acoustically and work on it, and then the finished version, I love that stuff. I love the backing tracks on For No One. I love hearing Paul's piano playing or the clavichord. Which one is it when I'm listening to the backing tracks? Is that mainly the clavichord?
It's piano. It's piano.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The basic track is piano and drums.
Okay. But I loved hearing that. In fact, I wouldn't have minded hearing just the backing tracks for every song. Which I question why there was nothing from Good Day Sunshine in there. You couldn't just give the backing tracks without the,
Yeah, I agree.
There's so many highlights. I loved hearing Love You Too, especially the demo from the very beginning. And then, because I've questioned so many times that intro for Love You Too, which they don't go into in the book. You know, whether or not George really wrote that. We didn't really know, I think, until now that it was all George on sitar on
Right.
Love You Too, and Paul played the tambora, and then they had the tabla playing, and that was it. I mean, John wasn't even on Love You Too. But to hear that other take of Love You Too, starting with the verse, and then to hear George play more sitar towards the end, I wanted that to keep going.
Yeah.
I love that. That was fantastic. I liked hearing all the different takes of Enya Burke can sing, how they worked that the dual guitar part in. But yeah, just the fascinating thing overall, we've discussed this, is to hear evolution of songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the biggest disappointments, though, was that I wish that we could have heard more of an evolution of Tomorrow Never Knows, considering how groundbreaking a song that was.
Yeah.
You know, how did it get from take one to the finished product? You know, it's nice to have the mono version of Tomorrow Never Knows that got pulled initially with more sound effects and everything. But what happened in between there? What point did Ringo come up with the drum pattern that was used?
Yeah.
You know,
Unfortunately, there don't seem to be any. There's a breakdown of take two, which is sort of the arrangement for the final take three, and then that's it. So it would be you know, it would be the tracks themselves. So it would be the bass and drum track, and then I mean, I think it would be useful. I thought they would include the isolated loops. I thought that would be interesting.
That would have been really interesting.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I'll be covering that on my podcast soon. So stay tuned. I'll be answering a lot of your questions. I
Plug,
can say no more.
I can say no more.
All right. We'll say more about that toward the end of the show. So where you can find it and everything. Okay. So Jason, what about you? What were some outtakes that really blew you away?
I mean, I agree with everything that everybody said so far. Andrew Bird can sing with was it take 5 with the backing vocals. I mean, that is probably I would have to say, if not my favorite, one of my favorite guitar riffs of all time. It's fun to play. It's really hard to play at speed. It's just a great part, just brilliant. But the Eleanor Rigby session chat where George is talking to the string players.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to hear that whole session. And you hear the outtake, some of the little accents and the way they play certain notes is a little different than the final mix. And, you know, I want to hear that evolution of how they get to that final take. You know, it's all subtle. I know it's little details, but I just found that incredibly illuminating. And it you know, again, it puts us in the room. That's the fascinating thing about this stuff. It puts us in the room and we get to experience their process, which, you know, to me with the podcast, that's critical. And I feel like seeing great artists process is just an inspiring and illuminating thing. So that was the one for me.
Yep. Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that too.
with the backing tracks on Eleanor Rigby, the strings, one of the things I found interesting was the very last note sustains.
Yeah.
Cuts off when the version that we all know and love. But just a little change there I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Joe, how about you?
Well, everything everybody said so far among my favorites, and what Jason brought up, with Eleanor Rigby, the talking, you hear George Martin, Paul, and I think some of the musicians that are playing on there. That's a real treat. Anytime you can kind of eavesdrop and hear them at work and talking, I love that.
Yeah.
Even on one of the takes of, I think it's first version, take 5 of "Gotta Get You Into My Life," there's more dialogue at the beginning, and even Ringo, is offering some stuff, which is great. What can I say? I mentioned take 7 of Dr. Robert before, which is a highlight for me. I don't know what it was. I mean, it's just how clear the vocals are, and it sounds so clean, and the well part is more intense than ever, and otherworldly and trippy and druggy. I don't think of that too much. Like, this is a druggy song, but I got that feeling listening to that. And I say instead of mentioning a lot of the same things everybody's mentioned, I'll have some other ones here, like even Rain. The regular speed that we know it as, being able to hear John's vocal alone, loud and up front like that. I really enjoyed that. And I wish "Love You Too" had been longer. The which one is it? Well, I think it's just the one with the backing music, and I just wish that it had been a little longer. One of them was really kind of short, and it leaves you like hungry to hear more. Yeah. So that's some of the ones that really. Oh, and "Yellow Submarine" I'll mention, even though we mentioned it. The evolution of that, hearing John's sad and somber origins of that, and then seeing how it developed. That was quite a trip. Getting to hear all that journey. Those are the highlights.
Like, never in a million years did I think Yellow Submarine started like that. Never in a million years. Absolutely.
Well, not if you read Paul's introduction. He
Yeah,
wrote that.
true. Yeah, true. I mean,
so-
that's just but to hear it, my goodness.
Yeah.
Tom, how about
Okay.
you?
Well, the chatter track 3 disc 1 or bonus disc 1 before, they're trying to tell Paul how to do, who's supposed to be the leader in the studio, and he just doesn't get the count in. That's the kind of stuff I just love to hear. You guys mentioned the "Love You Too," the acoustic version that could have fit on Early Takes Volume 1 easily. That's just the kind of stuff I love to hear from George. Bonus disc 2, take 2, Taxman with the "Anybody Got a Bit of Money" over and over. That's just, again, great stuff to hear. The evolution of the songs, like Ken says, especially we get 4 versions of "I'm Only Sleeping." We get a bunch of "Yellow Submarines" too, which is great. The Eleanor Rigby, I love the strings, the walking through what they're going to do, and that chatter there is everywhere. Is everything. I love it. Track 15, "Here, There, and Everywhere." I just get so moved when I hear Paul singing that song. It's just that version of what he sings is beautiful. And then lastly, track 16, "She Says, She Said," and it's making me feel like my trousers are torn.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is the stuff I go to right away when I get these box sets. All of us, I'm sure, we go right to. Well, I don't know. Maybe Jason, you're a little different. But,
No. I go over the outtakes. Yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah. And this didn't disappoint. Sure, we would like a little bit more evolution, like Ken says, but what we got, I think, is pretty magical. And it's a little disappointing that the CD's got to match the vinyl. In a way, I'm sure there's so much more that they could have given us.
Yeah.
On the CD, but it is what it is.
That's a good point about the vinyl. I actually didn't think of that. It probably had to match the vinyl, so they couldn't give us. They could
have fit another 20 minutes on the CD, and then they could have made it a third album, for the vinyl. So,
and of course, there's the EP. They could have added more in the EP, but that's another show.
Yeah, we're talking 81 minutes of outtakes over 2 discs, and one disc will hold almost 80 minutes. So it's really, it's not value for money. If there's one substantial criticism of this release, and I think previous releases, is that they're not packing these discs full of material, and not to scrape the barrel, but there's to show the process, to show the evolution of their ideas.
And I do want to give credit to the book. I think all the books in these sets have been amazing. The attention to detail, what they talk about, and then when they go through track, they kind of explain what you're hearing on the bonus discs. So very, very well researched and written. And I would say you definitely should be reading these books as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
If I may just say, there's a little bit of discussion in here, a little bit of friendly disagreement about the version of Taxman that has, in my opinion, that awful. Anybody got a bit of money? Anybody got a bit of money? Anybody got a bit of money? I'm so glad they axed that, but somebody here likes it, and it says he thought it fit the tone of the song perfectly. Richard says, and Some Tony DeMaio disagrees, and so do I.
Yeah. Yeah, I no, they were right to ditch that, but it's fun to hear. It's fun
But
to hear.
Exactly.
but how
Yeah.
much of this is what we're used to hearing, the way we're used
Mhm.
to hearing it, right?
Yeah.
If we had grown up with that version, would we say, what happened? Why'd they take it? They removed it
Exactly.
for 2022.
Yeah,
Well,
really.
again, it's their process. They're working out ideas on tape.
Yeah.
And that's the great thing to hear. And also that, you know what, they weren't perfect. They
Mhm.
had some ideas that
No,
really didn't work,
you
and
could have
that's
had a
great.
big hum at the end of a day in the life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't work either. But I'll just add one more thing is, I mean, there much of what you guys mentioned, I agree with, but I also loved hearing, I think, what was it? There were a couple of takes. One of them broke down, and then the other one of Paperback Writer. I loved
Right.
hearing just takes 1 and 2.
Yeah.
The first one broke down, and because they
They
couldn't
rock. They were
wasn't that rocked. I mean, it wasn't anything revolutionary or anything
Yeah.
like that, but it just showed they just were a damn good rock band, and they just were. I mean, I loved hearing that. Just hearing the backing track. So I mean, it was, it wasn't no sound loops or any backwards guitars or anything like that. It was just great, straightforward rock that they could play that too. They could still get back to their roots, and I just just what a varied album this was. And
No, it is. It like it has these experimental things, and it has these sort of softer ballads from Paul, and it has the string octet, but there's a lot of rock and roll. There's a lot of loud guitars on this album.
Exactly. And that they could still do that. And I mean, and I know, of course, it wasn't on the album, but it was, during those sessions. And it's just, it was so, what a great treat to hear that.
And I love them. We should mention them. I mean, because we haven't said anything about the EP. I mean, I love the mono Paperback Writer.
Me too. That was
Yeah.
probably my favorite mono mix. I thought that I really liked the mono mix of that. I agree that just really jumped out. I enjoyed that as well. Absolutely. So, well, I mean, there is so much more we could talk about, but we're running out of time here. So I think we'll have to save some questions for another episode, but I think we'll close it out though by I'd like to know how you think this set holds up against the other ones that have come out so far. I'm really curious. Some of you I can kind of guess, but some of you I don't know. So what do you think? How do you compare this with the other sets that have been out there so far? Jason, what do you think? How would you rate this against the others?
I think the White Album is still probably the best one they've done, just because of the amount of material.
Right.
I mean, they still could have given us more. I'm that guy who's like, thank you.
We always want more.
I'd like 10 more discs. But the fact that they gave, all the Easter demos and so many outtakes, I mean, that to me is the best they've done so far. It seems to me that they've been offering fewer and fewer tracks in the outtakes as we've been moving forward with this. And maybe that's because they're paying attention again to the vinyl, and they want to match that, which is a very 20th century way of thinking. It seems a little odd and outdated, because now we can stream. We don't have to be stuck to physical formats anymore.
I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of releasing music,
Understood.
in terms of how much you can release, and there are really no limitations. The only limitation is how much you actually want to put out there. So yeah, I think there can always be more. I've always said, take one of everything, release that, show us where they began, and give us an idea of if there's an evolution from take one to the final take. Let's see some takes between that, but take one is really important.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
I'd like to see more of that. But so I mean, I think Revolver is what got me started as a Beatles obsessive years ago. So, anything I can get about this album, I'm going to take it. and sort of folded into all the other material that we have already.
Okay.
So I'm grateful for that. And the book is great. The book is beautiful. So I can't complain about the design or the visual aspect of it. But I think the White Album is the one to beat.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Ken.
Ditto.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night. That was easy. Thanks.
You can't top the White Album for all the material that was put in there. I agree with everything Jason said about Take One should be included. You should have the backing tracks for every song. I don't see why that's impossible. If you're at a loss for anything, at least have the backing tracks. But one thing in reading the book for Revolver, there are plenty of times when they erased over themselves a lot of their tracks. So how many outtakes really are worthy of putting out? That's the thing you have to question, what Apple thinks is worthy of putting out.
Right.
I'm sure there's some of us that just want everything and it's not going to matter. But, and if they're going to be fussy about which takes are, another disappointment for me was, I want to tell you, the outtake, because all there was the backing tracks, and that only goes on for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
They put studio chatter in front of that to pad it. And then they don't even give you the full song because it breaks down.
Yeah.
So maybe they just didn't have enough worthy material. That's part of the problem in this whole thing, that we don't know, unless you've heard every single outtake of every single song, you don't know how much exists there. But I still think they could have given us more, or at the very least, like I've said before, combine the two discs of outtakes and make it one and charge less. I'm not in favor of these EPs coming out. They didn't do that with Sgt. Pepper. You didn't have a Penny Lane Strawberry Fields EP with the box set. You didn't have that with the White Album. The Let It Be, they started doing it. And it's just maybe to cost more to give us more of to pad the bill. But no, the White Album's the best of them all. But then again, I'm happy for anything to come out from the Beatles camp.
Yep.
Because they don't owe us anything, so I'm grateful for anything that comes out, anything that keeps the Beatles in the news, keeps them on the charts. I'm all for it. I still think a better job could be done. Sound quality, fantastic.
All right, Tom.
Yeah, White Album is number one on my list. With the Easter demos, and then an early version of Let It Be to boot on there. That was, how surprised were we all with that? Yeah. But this is I put this right in the middle of everything. I thought Abbey Road out to some of that stuff was amazing. The Billy Preston stuff on that was crazy too, hearing Billy Preston go crazy on a version of She's So Heavy.
She's
I
So
Want You.
Heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good set. I'm happy with for the most part. And yeah, let's get rid of the EPs, but it's a trend. Unfortunately, I think they're just gonna copy the CD to vinyl for here on out for all of these. And is it a shame? Maybe, but that's what we're gonna get. If this is what we have to expect, or this is what we're gonna get for it to continue to go, then I say fine, do what you have to do to continue it, but it's stupid.
We'll keep complaining. We'll keep complaining.
Yeah, I do
Because
that's what we do.
If it gets to me, I won't complain.
No, I do think it's important to speak up, because that's that's how we got the rooftop concert.
Right.
And and that's. I don't want to go into this too much, but there does seem to be a strange conservatism about releasing this stuff, as if to say, like, oh, really, the Beatles are popular? Well, amazing. Yes, fans are going to want this stuff. They're going to eat it up. And I think Apple should not underestimate that.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Joe.
Well, I don't have as much of a problem as many people, even in the comments, do with the EPs. The price, yeah, okay, the price I get. But as far as I like in the case of Paperback Writer and Rain, I like having them separate from the album, if you know what I mean, not just tagged on. Kind of,
Right.
I kind of like
Mhm.
that. But as far as like your question, I got to be different also about the White Album. Well, it depends what we're talking about. Are we talking about extras exclusively? In terms of bonuses, I think I agree that you can't beat the White Album in terms of the extra material. I think that was my favorite, but it would be my least favorite in terms of the remix. I think only there was like hit and miss is too much for me on there. I like a lot of stuff. Some stuff I didn't like on the White Album. You know, Helter Skelter stuff, and I'm not gonna. You can't name every track, but I didn't like what was done to George's Oz or whatever. Oh, it was moans and while my guitar gently weeps. But and other things I adored. You know, I can go on all the tracks. How many 30-something tracks there or something like that. But yeah, so where does Revolver stand? I think I'm having more of an appreciation for it as I listen to it more than I did on my first impression. I probably would put Pepper and Revolver as my two favorites in terms of the remixes themselves, maybe. You know, but for bonuses, I go with the White Album, number one.
I mean, I
Yeah.
can get keeping the integrity of the singles and keeping them separate. I can understand that. In a way, kind of like how they keep the integrity with the red, the red album, the blue album. You could easily put those onto one CD.
Yeah, on CD when they
right?
did that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's still silly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they could put it at the end of the second disc. I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
it's 4 tracks and they're not even 3 minutes. I think how long is Paperback Writer? It's not even 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like
Exactly.
they could
Well,
fit
it's either a
those in
matter
very
of the length or, like you said, the integrity of the separation of it.
Sure.
Whatever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pros and cons both ways, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, my concern is more value for money.
Yeah.
These things are getting more expensive for
Yep.
less material.
That
so-
why,
For
though.
sure.
I
Yeah.
think that's why they're expensive, because of the E EP.
But that's
don't
just
think
the
so.
thing, though, Jason. You say that we get the Lennon sets, which have more stuff on them, but yet
True.
they're cheaper.
Yeah.
So why is it okay for the Lennon camp to give you more and charge less, but then the Beatle camp, is it just because it's the Beatles?
I mean, I don't know. You have to
I don't know,
ask.
Barney
You have to
Camp.
ask them
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That's. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, because really the Lennon sets have been done so well. I mean, that Imagine set was gorgeous.
No,
Yeah.
I really think they get the fans. The Plastic Ono Band and Imagine sets are Sean really understands what fans want.
Yep. Absolutely.
That means sometime in New York City.
Yeah, let's hope.
Let's hope. Absolutely. And I have to say, I agree with you, Joe. I think for remixes alone, this and Sgt. Pepper are my favorite. And maybe Sgt. Pepper is still number one for remix, but this is a close second. But for extras, yeah, probably White Album is still ranks number one. I mean, just for bang for your buck, so to speak. So I agree. But well, we could go on and on talking about this all night. There's so much to. Did you want to say something, Ken?
Yeah, I was
Ken, sorry.
about the EP and keeping that separate.
Yeah.
So why didn't they put all the outtakes of Paperback Writer and Rain on the same CD with?
Yeah. There you go.
Then you would have had a lot less in the outtakes. You certainly could have fit all that onto one.
Yeah.
There you go. Good point.
And excellent point about the Lennon box sets. They have been the most generous by far.
And Tom, uniform, right? We like
uniformity.
Uniformity
is.
What's
like
with all
the
these
same
different
size.
sizes for every Beatles one? Put them all the same, like Lennon.
Well,
Same
I'm happy to
size.
say that this Revolver set is basically the same as dimensions as the Abbey Road set. So those and the Sgt. Pepper. So those look good together. It's the White Album had to be and Let It Be had to be difficult, but oh well. We got them. We got the sets. So let's go. All right, Kit.
I think we're losing.
Oh, we
No
lost
Yes,
sound
you're
from
muted.
Kit.
No sound from Kit.
We've lost her.
This is some night.
Uh-oh.
No one and I. You mute. I see the mute button on Kit.
Yeah. She's muted herself.
Well,
There
Jason,
we go.
while Kit's trying to figure it
Still
out,
hear
why
you.
don't you tell us tell everybody where they can find your
Yeah.
show and how to
We'll
get a
wrap it
hold
up.
of you and all this
Wait,
stuff.
Kit, why don't you say something, Kit?
She has been.
I thought I saw that she was muted.
Oh no, something's going on with her audio.
Okay.
I had this the other night when I was talking to her when we were doing a test for this.
Right.
Anyway, you can find Producing the Beatles on iTunes and basically anywhere you find podcasts. It's being distributed probably, I don't know. I'm seeing it all sorts of places where I'm like, wait, hold on, how did they get there? And new episodes will be coming soon. I'm working on Isn't It a Pity right now, and I'll be doing one for a Paul solo track, and I have a bonus episode specifically about Ringo, and then I'll start the new season, which is going to be all about Revolver and things you didn't even know about Revolver. Lots of these isolations I've been playing, and if you'd like to hear more of the isolations than I play on the podcast, you can go over to my Twitter, PT Beatles, where I'm specifically right now sharing vocal isolations from Revolver, usually 30 seconds to a minute, and no copyright strikes like we would get here.
Okay.
Don't want you guys to get, taken down.
You're right. Yes, thank you for that. Thank you. Joe, why don't we
Hey, we sound like the
go next to you?
chipmunks.
Yeah.
Everybody sounds a little sped up for some reason. I don't think I
Yeah.
do. I don't know what. But anyway, yeah, well, my channel on YouTube is Mean Mr. Mayo, and lately the biggest thing I've been doing is doing like several videos Revolver related, and check those out. Also check out my show. It's a discussion show called Fab Gab, and we just did one of those on Revolver as well. But of course, YouTube changed things around. You might want to also, in addition to clicking on videos, also click on live. Some of them are live shows that are there. And I think do we hear Kit now?
Yep. We can Kit talk.
Well,
Okay.
I guess not yet. Okay, next.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I hear you now.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
I'm
Let me
good.
get my camera on. Hang on.
All
I hope I
right.
can get it back on. I don't know why it isn't.
There
There
you
we
go.
go. I'm back. I don't know
All
what
right,
happened.
so-
So
All right.
I'm back. One
All
of
right.
those
Well,
nights.
Joe was talking
finished.
about what's going on with him.
Okay, I could hear you. I could hear you guys. You
Yeah,
couldn't
that's
hear
it.
me,
I'm
so
done.
that's
I'm
weird.
done.
Okay, go right ahead.
All right, go ahead, Kit. Kit, it's your turn.
Okay, so well, first of all, you can find us on Talk More Talk on our website, talkmoretalk.com. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us, of course, right here on this channel. Please subscribe. Please hit that bell if you want to be notified of future episodes. But you can find us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1. You can also email us for suggestions. If you have suggestions of future topics, you might find one of your ideas on a future show. You can, of course, send us feedback as well. We always like to hear from you. You can find us on any podcasting platform you can think of. Pretty much, we're everywhere. And you can also find us on Fab4 Radio, thanks to our friend Beatle Ed. Thank you so much. You run a lot of our shows, individual shows as well. So he's one of our biggest supporters. As far as I go, I am on a couple of episodes of a good friend of our show, Ed Shen, when they was Fab, talking about, you won't believe this, Revolver.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Other people are talking about Revolver. That's
I know.
incredible.
It's shocking, and so gosh. So go check his show out when they was Fab. We did a 2-parter on that. My next class, the next in the series of Roots Rock and Roll Part 2 is starting December 1st. So if you haven't registered, you might want to do that as soon as you can. The spots are filling up. We're going to be talking about country, folk, and yes, skiffle. So you don't want to miss that. And I'm going to be teaching 2 more classes, and I'll tell you more about that in our next episode, because the registration links aren't up yet. So I'll tell you about that when more details are available. So that's it for me.
Okay. For
Ken's
2
last.
legs.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I forgot you, Tom.
That's all right. That's all right. We forgot Billy Preston. All right. Two legs. We've done a few videos over the last couple weeks. We did one 2 weeks ago about a possible, record from Paul in 2023, whether it's going to be a new studio album or maybe even High in the Clouds music. We know that that's coming soon on Netflix. So go over there and check that out. We also did a show with a gentleman named Tony Shelley, who's got a wonderful Beatles channel called Beatly Tones Beatles channel. And we did was a show on picked 5 things that we thought Paul did right throughout his solo career. That could have been suing the other 3 to to save them from Klein, or that could have been just working with Elvis Costello. I mean, just things like that. We had a great time.
It wasn't skipping the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I don't think.
No. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is on a show. We just started releasing some archive stuff because, as people know, we were only an audio podcast for the first couple of years with me and my cousin. And we just dropped the first one from that on YouTube this past weekend, and that was a thing that was 5 things that we thought Paul did wrong in his career, and absolutely not going to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was one of them. So check that out. Once a month, we're going to be dropping some shows that hadn't been on YouTube because, like I said, we were audio only for a couple years, and we're going to do an archive series, and that'll be once a month. If you want to email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. And Ken, off to you.
Okay, first of all, my YouTube channel, which is Ken Michaels Radio. I just did an interview with Bruce Spicer and Al Sussman for Bruce's new book, Rubber Soul 2 Revolver, for which Al contributed 2 pieces. And Bruce Spicer's work is, among the best, as you know. And he'll be continuing with more books in commemoration of the Beatles albums. If you can, check that out. My other podcast things we said today, we just did a show on the outtakes from Revolver, and our next show will be on the remix from Revolver.
Yeah.
See?
Wow.
Copying us, really, when you get down to it. My radio show, Every Little Thing, instead of saying on my website, look at all the radio stations that have it, let me just tell you that one radio station, WFDU, Fairleigh Dickinson University's radio station that runs my show Sunday mornings at 6, they have the show on demand. So you can listen to the show whenever you want to at their website, wfdu.fm. And just look at archival shows, type in Every Little Thing. They have the last 2 weeks shows on there, so you can listen whenever you want to. On my website, there'll be Beatles trivia right after the show ends. You can play the Beatles game, Scrambled Eggs, and your chance of 1 of 10 prizes that you can win. And pretty soon it'll be this baby right here, Ringo at the Greek Theater 2019. And pretty soon I'll be giving away, it's a special contest on my website, the 2 CD DVD as well. All right. I think that's everything.
Okay, fantastic. Well, this has been a great show tonight. Kind of a crazy technical show, but we go with the flow here. It's all live. So thank you all for putting up with our craziness tonight. Jason, thank you so much again for being on the show. You are always welcome back here. We love having you on.
Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, thank you. And you really gave us a great new perspective into these mixes, into the album. It was just a joy having you on. So thank you so much. So for Tom, Ken, Joe, and Jason, this is Kit saying, I hope you enjoy every sound there is. Good night, everybody.
Good night.